to finish a little bit about the introduction that we had last week. We still have some odds and ends to cover on that. Because it's very important to understand these things. You know, when a person understands these things, then he knows what's Torah, he knows what's halakha, he knows all these things, he understands much better. So we discussed a lot of things, but we still have to say a few things. Which is what? That we have to say that when a person, what is the importance of learning halakha? Why is it so important? So there's two sources in the Talmud regarding this, right? The words of Chazal. One is that what? That we read this every day when we pray Shachrit. When we pray in the morning prayers, what do we say? We say that Tana Develiyahu, Kol HaShomei Halachot B'chol Yom, Muftach Lo Shehu Ben HaOlam Haba. Right? What does that mean? That if a person learns every day halachot, he's assured to be a member of Olam Haba, of the world to come. So it's considered to be a very, very big ma'ala, a very big advantage for a person to learn halakha. Can you imagine if you learn halachot every day, they send you straight over there to Olam Haba. Unbelievable.
There's a few ways to make it straight.
It's a good point. Yeah.
Your wife, I think, like if she abuses you.
Wow. Okay.
And you can actually buy your way to heaven, from what I remember.
Oh, you can buy. Okay, how you buy it?
Tzedakah. If you
You're right.
Like immense amount of money to tzedakah.
Yeah, even if you give, whatever, according to your ability, it doesn't have to be so immense. If you're rich, you give more. If you're not so rich, you give less.
Kill somebody, come bring the money into tzedakah.
But
This is so logical.
so I must tell you that this is a very good thing what you're saying, and this will help us to explain what we're talking about here, because over here, right, it's really a contradiction here. Why? Because there's a different Mishnah that says that what? Kol Yisrael Yeshem Chelek Olam Haba. That's what it says. So apparently it contradicts what we're saying over here. Over here we're saying the ones who learn halachot every day, they're Ben Olam Haba. They're the sons of Olam Haba. But when it comes to the other place, it says everybody has. All the Jews have. So the question is why, it seems to be a contradiction. What's the answer? So the answer is, if you look into the wording of these two places, these two sayings of the Chazal, you'll understand there's a difference there, right? Because over there, when it says Kol Yisrael Yeshem Chelek Olam Haba, every Jew has a portion of Olam Haba. That's talking about what? He has a portion. What does that mean, portion? That means, like when you go to the pizzeria, right? Whatever. So you get a pie, right? You split it up. Everybody gets 2 slices. So you got a portion in the pie. That's what it means, right? You got something there. You got a piece. 1 piece, 2 pieces, whatever it is. But here, we're not saying you have a portion when you learn halachot. What we're saying is that you're Ben Olam Haba. That's different. What's the difference, right? Ben Olam Haba, it means like you're a full-fledged member, Somebody who has like a free pass, carte blanche to go anywhere he wants, enter any area that he wants to, every zone, every country, every synagogue, every yeshiva he can go to. That's already a different level. Understand? It's not the same thing. Ben Olam Haba, that means you're over there considered to be a privileged member, VIP. You're VIP status. But when you have Chelek Olam Haba, that means you have a house, you have something, you got a garage, right? Giving you like an allegory, right? You got something, but doesn't mean you can go anywhere you want. You have to show a passport. You got to pay maybe whatever. You got to pay admission fees. Not everybody. It's restricted zones. I'm sorry.
What if we settle for that?
If you settle.
Yeah.
Okay, you can settle, but what I'm saying is that we got to know, right, that if you don't want to settle, you want to go for the best, you want to be VIP, you know what I mean? So then how do you do it? So the answer is, right, that if you learn halakha, you're considered to be VIP in Olam Haba. You have privileged status.
I'm sorry. In the Perek Shira, it says that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, he said that anybody who studies Perek Shira every day, all the Shira will come.
Right. So again, right, we're saying that there are certain things, as David said, that give you a share. Chelek. Get a piece of the pie, right? 2 slices, whatever. But when it comes to being Ben Olam Haba, this is the ticket.
As I am now, I don't qualify even for a slice.
I don't know why you say that, but
I don't know. I'm asking.
okay. Well, we'll have to investigate you. We'll get the FBI, to make a report. The Inspector General, and then we'll try to we'll try to make an assessment.
You'll find some roaches, but you'll give me an area.
We'll try to make an assessment, Then we'll make an evaluation and everything. We'll try to grade you, okay. Whatever, we have to do some investigation. Everybody, who really knows all these things? Only Hashem knows, right? Who really knows these things? We don't really know who's going to be and who's not going to be, right? But we have some...
Most people will make it, you told me.
Well,
It's have to go through some suffering.
we have to talk about that. We'll talk about that. What does that mean? Most people, yes, most people know. We're talking about all Israel, right? Yeah. All the Jews.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? That what is it coming to exclude? It's coming to exclude also, obviously, the non-Jews. Not all of them have. Not all of them. Probably most of them won't. Why? Because they're serving idols. A person who does idolatry, or does, adultery, these kinds of things. And he's regular to do these kinds of things.
But Rabbi,
He never repented. He never did tshuva. He never,
I don't want to be
So, yeah.
but most of us are born into circumstance.
Yeah.
A Christian is born into a Christian.
Yes, it's true. Yeah, it's true.
They
Yeah.
don't know they're serving an idol. I mean, they have no chance even to find out about the real Torah.
Right. It's a good question what you're asking. Actually, the Talmud discusses this actually. Exactly what you're saying, it's written in the Talmud. What does it say? The Talmud says a very important a rule regarding this, right? That when it comes to the Gentiles, the non-Jews, the ones who are in the diaspora outside of Eretz Israel, and they're doing they're going to their church and all this, they're not really considered to be idolaters.
Wow.
That's what the Talmud says.
Really?
Yeah. Why is that? Because they're just keeping the custom of their forefathers, basically. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So therefore that technically speaking, right, a goy, this is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu lets them live. Why? Because if a person is really an idolater, he deserves to die. He shouldn't even live out 1 year.
Not only lets them live, but remember the seminars we used to attend at Rabbi Lazarus' lectures. He said that miracles and divine things have been happening to the goys for
Yeah, sure. That also happens. There's a lot of interesting things. But what I'm saying is like this, right? That regarding the idolatry, it's really true, right? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't consider this for them idolatry. By the way, there's also a different reason why it's not considered idolatry. Because according to Tosfot, one of the big rabbis, right? Tosfot says that the idolatry that they do, the goyim nowadays, right? Christianity, for them it's allowed to do that. They're allowed. Why is that? Why are they allowed to do it? Because they're using this this loser, whatever. They're using him as an intermediary to get to God, You understand? So what that means is that since they're using him as an intermediary, for a goy to do it, to serve God this way is allowed, according to Tosfot. We're not allowed to do that. For us, it's considered to be like a deal breaker. You understand? It's a deal breaker when for the Jew for a Jew.
Said that there was a reason for him for coming, because there were pagans before that.
Right. Right, but it doesn't mean, by the way, that the Rambam doesn't mean to say that it was actually a good thing. What it means is that something good came out of it. By the way, through the back door. You know what I mean? That's what it means to say.
But didn't he also say it was predicted that Hashem wanted it this way?
Well, everything Hashem knew everything about everything what it's going to be, but it doesn't justify. It doesn't justify. You know what I mean? Anyway, the point is, right, that the goy who serves God in this manner, there is some justification for him, right? As we said, there's two things, right? One is that, according to Tosfot, he's allowed to do through an intermediary to serve God this way. Number two is also because they're considered to be like just the custom of their forefathers. These two things, right? But anyway, the point is that doesn't preclude something else, though. If you really look in the world today, right? Most of the population of the world today is not really Christians or Muslims. It's really like pagans, these Easterners, talking about, China and India, right? Most of the population of the world is there. So these people are idolaters. They're
Chinese are Christians.
Not really. Most of them are not. So these are idol worshippers, these people. Most of the Oriental,
Our neighborhood on Queens Boulevard is practically Asian.
Yeah, they convert over here, David. They convert over here. They convert them over here. But when they're over there, most of them are not Christians. Anyway, the point is, right, that I think most of the world, we can safely say, is serving idols, basically, right? Is doing idolatry. Even a type of idolatry which is not allowed for them. You understand? So now regarding that, but still, the Talmud says, right, that the reason why Kadosh Baruch Hu spares them is because they just inherit the custom of their forefathers. So they're not really considered to be idolaters in that sense. You know what I mean? But that's in this world. You understand? In this world, Kadosh Baruch Hu lets them off the hook. Lets them pass. But in the world to come, that's already a different story. Right? What does that mean? In the world to come, there's a higher standard. A person who was basically living an idolatrous, sinful life in this world probably will not have a portion in the world to come. Even though in this world they let him slip. They let him slip. But in the world to come, that's not going to be an excuse, really, in the world to come. So what does that mean? That really there's going to be only a small portion, let's say 1/3, 1/4 of the whole entire world that will survive for the world to come, and the rest of them will not survive.
We're talking about all of history, all of mankind.
Yeah.
It's a big number.
Yeah, it's a big number. But we're talking about billions of people. Yeah. Right? They say, right, the Gainam has no limits. You can put a lot of people in Gainam. There's no limits. There's no, it's not like Yankee Stadium, you can put only 50,000. In Gainam, you can put 50 million, 50 billion. There's no limitation. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. What are you saying? That's idolatry. Yeah, it's idolatry. Yeah, it's idolatry. Yeah. It's all idolatry, these things. Yeah, it's all idolatry. Yeah. Sure. All these things are idolatry. But anyway, the point is, Rabbi, getting back to what we were saying, right, that the Jews, we said, Okol Yisrael, but it also comes to exclude different, right, we talked about Gentiles now, right? Now we covered that. Now what about, there's also some Jews who don't have a portion. They're called Jews, but really they're Erevav, right? What does that mean? These are the Jews that converted from Egypt, that did not convert L'Shem Shamayim, right, for the sake of heaven. They converted because the Jews were wealthy, they wanted to, and prominent, and they had prominence and wealth. So these converts said they converted not L'Shem Shamayim, not for the sake of God, which is we call the Erevav. Right? There's also, by the way, good converts, right? There's also, there's also a good type of convert. Good convert, we call them what? Ger Tzedek. A righteous convert. That's a good thing, right? But a person who converts for ulterior motives, that's considered to be Erevav. Right? Somebody who's not really worthy to be a Jew. And what happens is like this, right? That nowadays, in our times, these people who are the Erevav, who converted, not L'Shem Shamayim, not for the sake of heaven, they get reincarnated into the Jews again and again. They come back again and again every generation. So these people actually are the majority of the Jews. They're like about 80% of the Jews. You understand? Even in the time when they left Egypt, 80% was Erevav.
80% died also.
That was real Jews. But we're talking about the ones who left, right? 80% of them were Erevav. So what does that mean? The Erevav also has no portion in the world to come. They don't have a portion. Even though that they're Jews, technically speaking. Why is that? Because they're not, even though they're technically speaking Jews, but they don't have, their souls are not Jewish. You understand? So the truth is, right, when we say Kol Yisrael, we're talking about the real Jews, the ones who are from the real Jewish souls, right? That believe in God, believe in Torah, believe in the truth of the Torah, believe in these things. So those are the ones who we're talking about, right? But the ones who are Erevav, like, those guys you find in Tel Aviv and in the Knesset, these kinds of people over there, most of them are Erevav, these people, That's already something else, we're not talking about those people. But there's also another thing, right? That there are some Jews who are not Erevav, but they look like Erevav. What does that mean? That they're secular. They fell into that black hole with the Erevav, you understand? So for them, the job is to do tshuva, to become a Baal tshuva, to get out of that black hole. They're really Jews, but they fell into that trap, the klipa of the Erevav. So for them, they have to get out of there. That's their job, right? But the real Erevav, the ones who are really, their souls are not Jewish. So therefore, those Jews will never do tshuva. They don't have any tshuva. So they're going to be the same fate as the idolaters, right? The same thing, because they're not. They don't live a Jewish life either. These people, right? They don't live a Jewish life, and that's exactly right. Always, David, my friend was asking about this. By the way, why was he asking? That go to Israel and see what you see over there. You see like a different picture than you should really be seeing. So that's the answer, right? You understand? There's Erevav over there, 80% Erevav. Maybe 20% were, if we're lucky, are real Jews. The rest of them are Erevav. And the point is that the Erevav don't have a portion in the world to come. That's what says Zohar Kadosh. Getting back to our issue, right? But when we say, right, person who learns halacha, we're talking about somebody who has a VIP status in Olam Haba, not just a little piece, a little bis, No, he has real high status over there. That's already something else, right? So we see from there, by the way, that learning halakha is considered to be in God's eyes a very, very great thing. Something really top-notch. There's also another thing, right, that we find in the Talmud, Masechet Brachot. Over there it says, Mi'az churban bet hamikdash, en nekadosh baruch hu be'olamo, ela arba amot shel halakha. This is an amazing thing. What does it say over there? It says, right, that since the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where does he really like to be? In other words, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, right? Where does it really come? Where is it located? In the place where they study halakha. That's where you find it. Right? Exactly. 4 amot, that means the makom, the place, right, that you say they study halakha. What does that mean? When you go to the yeshiva, right, or the kollel, or the studying of their halakha, that's where you're going to find HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's where you find Hashem. In this generation, in the times of the diaspora, when the Beit HaMikdash is not built, as opposed to what? When the Beit HaMikdash was built, right, when it was standing, and will be rebuilt, B'ezrat Hashem, so then it'll change a little bit. Why is that? Because the Bet HaMikdash really is a center of Shekhinah, of divine presence, right? And over there, it's not only because of halakha, it's also because of the holiness of the sacrifices, and the offerings that they do over there, and all the service, and also, you have people who are studying, Kabbalah, secrets of the Torah, which was a higher level. You understand? Yeah, the Bet HaMikdash, in general, right? In all Israel. It's a different time, it's a different quality over there. You understand? Not only the Bet HaMikdash. We're talking about the whole generation is different. When there's a Bet HaMikdash, it's a different quality. So because of that, even though in times of Bet HaMikdash, the real holiness will be, in a different plateau. We're talking about studying the secrets of God, the secrets of Hashem, the Kabbalah, all these things. Nowadays, most people cannot learn Kabbalah. We don't have this, traditions about this. We don't really know so much about that. So what does that mean? That a person nowadays has to make his main diet in Torah from the halakha. That's where the main diet should be, because that's where he's going to find the divine presence. The Shekhinah is going to be found over there. That's what it says in the Gemara. So we have also another source that really the study of halakha is considered to be the most important thing. But I must tell you, right, that we have to make a condition over here, right, a caveat over here, because we're not talking about studying halakha like, just like a parrot, like a cookie bird, tookie bird. What does that mean? Oh, just like you hear from the rabbi and you repeat it over, boo, 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 like a tookie. So that's not really what we're talking about, right? We're not talking about this kind of halakha. What does that mean? Just to learn the law and say, okay, well, this is allowed, this is not allowed, That's not what we're talking about. Because you're not really learning the reasons behind it. You're not learning the whole depth of the subject matter. You're just learning, right, if it's allowed or not allowed. This is not considered to be really study of halakha. At least for men, right? There's a difference between men and women. What's the difference? The difference is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded Moshe Rabbeinu, when you teach the men halakha, teach them the depths of the halakha, What's the source? Why is this? Why that? The logic, back and forth, the opinions. This opinion says like that. This opinion says like that. Right? To make a whole big structure out of this, to make a big ruckus out of this whole thing. That's considered to be really the study of halakha, right? The proper way, for men. But women, that's a different story, right? Women are really exempt from the study of Torah. They're not really obligated to study Torah. The obligation of studying Torah is really on the men. You know what I mean? What does that mean? Let me explain to you, right? Women also study Torah, but they're not obligated to study Torah in depth, to go into the reasons, to go into the opinions, this opinion, that opinion, why this one is right, why this one is wrong, to make these deductions and these reasoning and all these kind of things, right? It's not for women. Women don't have time for that. They're taking care of their family, taking care of their house, they're taking care of their children. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu absolved them from that, right? Exempted them from this mitzvah of learning Torah in depth, with a real comprehensive manner. Women are exempt from that. So who's obligated? Only the men, really, right? So therefore, the women are obligated to learn halakha. You know why? Because they have to know what's allowed, what's not allowed. That's the reason why. Not because they have a mitzvah to study in depth. They don't have that mitzvah. So therefore, the women, when we teach them, 1, 2, 3, ABC, right? Just, this is allowed, this is not allowed, this is allowed, this is not allowed. When it comes to men, they have to go deep into it, right? And the men, by the way, their minds are made for that, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu gave them more like an analytical mind than the women, sort of, So therefore, the men are more adapt to go into the depths of the Torah. Women are not so adapt to this, by the way. There are exceptions to the rule, by the way. There are some women who were very, sharp and smart, and they were able to become like chachamim, it's pretty rare, this kind of thing, right? It's not so common. In most cases, women don't get to this level. Because, as we said, right, they have other things to do, and also their mindset is not really built for that. It's not really right. What does that mean? That women are smart, by the way. We're not telling you that they're stupid. That's not what we're trying to say, right? Actually, they're very smart, but their mindset is built to deal with multiple tasks at one time, taking care of the children, taking care of this, doing this, right, taking all kinds of things. They're able to scatter their focus all over the place, right? Men have a hard time doing that. When they're focused on one thing, they don't want to go to another thing, right? They want to finish off their first this. Wait a minute, before you go to a different topic, let's finish this one first. Why are you jumping now to something else? A man doesn't like that, But a woman can do multitask. She can jump from one thing to another. It doesn't bother her. Yeah. So women have a different kind of mindset. They have a different kind of mentality.
They also don't have hobbies like we do. They're not really infatuated with automotive.
Yes. Actually, to be honest with you, this is considered to be, in a sense, it's considered to be like they're superior to us in that sense. What does that mean?
Absolutely.
That they're more practical. We get obsessed with all kinds of things, the obsession, this obsession, that obsession, this hobby, that hobby, going crazy about something. Women don't go crazy about anything. They just want to pay the bills, They want to live a normal, good life, healthy life. They're practical people, women. So in that sense,
they're also able to leave things behind and not look back, like have no remorse.
Yeah, they're more like they don't get too caught up with obsessed with all kinds of issues, this and that. The truth is, right, bottom line, that the women are considered to be just more practical beings. They just know how to live they know how to live a better life than in this world than we do, actually. What does that mean? That they know how to do everything practically, everything with proper planning, proper They're just very good. They're very good at that. So,
talking about skiing.
So that's a different story. But anyway, the point is, right, that women are actually very good, and that's why they say, right, the Chazal, because of the women are so practical, they have a good practical minds. So therefore, the Chazal say that if a woman gives you advice about practical things, you should listen to her. If your wife gives you advice, do this, do that, do that. If it happens to be practical. About practical issues, you should listen to the woman. Listen to your wife. So then, when should you not listen to her? When it comes to Torah matters, right? Because really, you should be over there. You should be higher than her. You should be more educated than the woman. So therefore, when it comes to Torah matters, they say, don't listen to your wife. When it comes to practical matters, listen to your wife, because they know better than us. They're better. So it really depends, right, on the situation, right? What we're talking about. So really, right, women have a very strong points. There's also another thing, right, which Avi just mentioned, right? Well, I wanted to mention that too. Thanks, Avi. Thank God bless you. So, what he said, right? That women also have a special bina. What does that mean, bina? Understanding, like some kind of a sixth sense, what do they call that? There's a special word for it in English. Intuition, right, exactly. They have intuition. This intuition allows them to go, into the depths of something, to realize something, without really knowing all the facts. Just like they sense it. It's like a sixth sense that they have, some men have it also it's true. But the truth is, right, but women have a higher level of this in general, and that's their superiority, right? That they can recognize a character of somebody without really knowing them. Just look at them, and they can already read into what he is and how he is. So women have all kinds of advantages, but when it comes to learning Torah, right, there the men have to dominate this field, right? That's really our forte, as they say, right? So a man has to be, when it comes to halakha, when it comes to Jewish law, when it comes to these things, who should be the head of the household? The man should be regarding these things, right? Not the woman. That's not the good thing, that a woman should be the head of the household regarding these things. The Chazal tell us, when it comes to these things, don't listen to your wife. When it comes to practical matters, listen to your wife. Depends on the situation. So anyway, Rabbi, now we understand a little bit better, right? What it means, learning halakha, how important it is, and it's considered to be the highest level. Also, there's another thing, right? Which is, we have to discuss also a little bit about the generations of Torah, right? And how each generation fares up against the other. There are periods, there's all kinds of periods. So we have to know one thing, right? That when it comes to the Torah, the Rambam, by the way, explains this also very well in his introduction to his Mishneh Torah. He explains, right, the history of halakha, how it evolved, how it was developed, all these things. So the way it was, like you have to understand that the way it was in the old days, right, when there was a Bet HaMikdash and there was a Bet Din, there was a Sanhedrin, there was a high court. So the way it was that there were 70 men over there sitting there, right, judges, big rabbis, and they were the ones, any matter in halakha which would come before them, they would vote on that. They would take a vote, right? First of all, they would have a discussion about, bringing sources from here and there, from this book and that book, or this, whatever, this Gemara, this Bible, this, Chumash, and whatever, and there are all kinds of sources, this tradition, oral tradition, whatever it is. They will bring sources and deliberate with each other, try to convincing each other, to see who's right, who's wrong. And in the end, once the deliberation was over, they would take a vote. Right? That's the way it was. So here, right, we have, the truth is, right, that we Jewish people are the fathers of democracy, because we see, right, that we had a democracy in the court. The majority was the one that won out. That's the way it was. There's no ifs and buts when it comes to that. Has nothing to do with age. Regardless of age, regardless of the size of the beard, right? If there's peyot, there's no peyot, antennas, you have antennas there. Doesn't make any sense. You have antennas, whatever. No difference. The only thing is we regard as that everybody has one vote. They take a vote. Whoever has the majority, that's halakha. That's the way it was. So therefore, because we had this system in halakha, in Jewish law, there was never any, in the end, right, at the end of the day, the law was very well known, It was clear to everybody, and there was no dispute. Once they vote, you cannot change it anymore. That's it. Unless they took another vote, right, they decided to do another vote, that's something else. But in general, right, once they take a vote, it's a final decision, and that's it. That's, it's decided.
Now, when you say we're the fathers of democracy, we had a kingdom.
Yes, we have a king, right, that's the, executive branch, right? And there's also the judicial branch, right? There's different things.
The king didn't overrule.
When it comes to halakha, the king has no voice in that. He has no say. Right. When it comes to Jewish law, the king is not a part of that deliberation, unless he's also a big rabbi. That's something else. If he's also a big rabbi, so sometimes he can also deliberate with them, right? Whatever. The truth is, right, in the first temple, usually the kings were actually big rabbis in themselves. In most cases, right? That's the way it was. So they were very knowledgeable, but the truth is, right, that the rabbis decided to sometimes not allow them to sit in the court and to deliberate with the court. Because when the king was coming in to deliberate with them, sometimes there was erupted like some kind of a dispute, and sometimes that would cause like all kinds of issues, whatever, because people are scared of the king, he has a lot of political power. So they were afraid to argue with him, all kinds of issues involved with that, right? So the point is that, right, there's a court, and it is decided by the majority of the rabbis that are there, the judges that are there in the court. That's the way it is. So this is very good, right? Because at the end of the day, there's no dispute. There's nothing to dispute, nothing to talk about. But what happened was, right, this system was going on for many, many generations. But what happened was, at the end of the Second Temple, as the Romans started to persecute the Jews, right, and give them all kinds of headaches, running from one place to another, chasing them out from here, going there, exiles, right, all kinds of evil decrees they made on the Jews. Life became very hard for the Jews. So what happened was that the Bet Din, the court, had to relocate because of this all the time. They really should be in Jerusalem, right? That's where they were the court, the high court. By the way, there was 3 courts over there in Jerusalem. Not only one, there was 3. One on top of the other, the appeals court and, this, and then the Supreme Court, right? There was different levels over there. 3 different levels. It wasn't just one court. It would go first to this one. If they couldn't decide, they would send it to a higher court, so forth, so on, right? I'm sorry?
The whole court system is
Yeah, basically, I mean, you could say that they copycatted a lot of things that they took from us, whatever. But the point is, right, that in the end, what happened was that the Romans persecuted. So what happened was that the Bet Din, the court, was dissolved because of that in the end. That's what happened, right? Because the truth is, right, you're not allowed to have a high court like this in the diaspora, right? Because they cannot do over there to ordain new judges over there. You're not allowed to ordain in the diaspora. So because of that, and this is the reason why we don't have one today as well, right? So because of that, what happened was that the high court was dissolved. And at that time, as the Jews scattered all over several countries, right, here, over there, right, scattered all over, so then, because of this reason, there was disputes from one place to another, right? The rabbis of France say like this, the rabbis of Spain say like that, right? The rabbis of Germany, then the rabbis of Iraq, Bavel, right? The Middle East, Morocco, and this and that, all kinds of places, right? So what happened was that because of that, that's why the disputes came in. It's not clear what's the halakha anymore. Why is that? Because they don't take a vote. There's no high court. So because of that, now it's become confused. So because of this, we have to understand, right? How does it work nowadays? How do we decide the halakha nowadays? Because of this issue. So what happened was, right, basically, after the high court was dissolved, there was a time which was called the time of the Talmud, right? The period of Talmud. Those rabbis were called Emoraim. The rabbis of Talmud were called Emoraim. What does that mean, Emoraim? It literally means speakers, people who spoke, whatever. Just it's a nickname, whatever. But the point is, right, that these rabbis argued with each other about the halakha. So what happened was that they used to, in the end, there was all kinds of disputes. So came two big rabbis, right, about 500 years after the destruction of Bet HaMikdash, even less than that, and they decided to write the Talmud down. To write it down, right, because everything was done orally at that time. This is the oral Torah, right? So they decided to write down the Talmud, and who was that? Ravina and Rav Ashi, right? These two big rabbis who were in Bavel at that time. They decided to write it down. So what they did was, they decided the law according to all the deliberation that was done. Until that time, they finally, decided what was the halakha. In many cases, in most cases, there were many cases also they were not able to decide what was the halakha. They were not able to make a final decision. It wasn't decided. So therefore, what happened was that we came out once the Talmud was already finished and done with. There was still a lot of questions that we didn't know what's halakha, what's the law, because it wasn't decided. So there's also another issue, right? That there was also things that they never spoke about in Talmud because those issues were not yet relevant in the world. There was new things, right, came about. All kinds of new issues came about. So all these new issues that came about, that came out new situations in the world. So all these things had to be decided also after the Talmud was already finished, because Talmud never dealt with these issues. So what happened was that there was a period after that, a period of the Geonim, right? The Geonim were the rabbis that came after the Talmud, and most of them were in Iraq, in Bavel, and the Middle East, in that area. Right? And then, after that was the Rishonim. The Rishonim came after the Geonim. So the period of the Geonim was a few hundred years, right? Which was after the Talmud. And then came the period of the Rishonim. The period of the Rishonim started about the time of Rabbeinu Hananel, right? Who was one generation before Rashi. Yeah? So that was the time where the period of the Rishonim started. So that, you're right, exactly. The Rif, Rabbeinu Hananel, they were the ones who were the first Rishonim. And the period of the Geonim ended. So now the interesting thing is, right, like this, right, that since the times of the Talmud, in the times of the Talmud, what happened was that those rabbis were on a higher level. And the ones who came after the Talmud, they realized that they were not on that level anymore. In terms of their understanding, in terms of their fear of God, they didn't have that level of the rabbis of the Talmud. And they realized it. It was clear to them. So therefore, what they decided to do was like this, right? The Geonim and the Rishonim that came after them. This is talking about the medieval times, right? Rishonim, medieval. So what happened was that they decided that they're not going to argue with the conclusions of the Talmud. They're not going to argue. Why? Because they're not on level to do that. So therefore, whatever they concluded in Talmud to be the halakha, they didn't argue with these things because they were not on level. They knew they were not on level. So they decided to just accept it as, as halacha. Yes.
How long ago was the Talmud written?
The Talmud was written about 1,500 years ago. Yes. So what happened was that the Geonim and the Rishonim, they also had disputes with each other about all kinds of issues. Yeah. There was many of them, right? There was many Geonim, there was even more Rishonim. Now, when it comes to the period, these two periods, right, the Geonim and the Rishonim, what happened was that the Rishonim felt strong enough to argue with the Geonim. So they didn't make this rule by them that they're not going to argue with the Geonim, even though there was a period before that.
Yeah.
But the Rishonim felt that they had the strength, they had the might to go in with go into the ring, right? 15 rounds. Go in with the Rishonim and with the Geonim and argue with them. So therefore you find, right, many things which there's a machloket, there's a dispute between with the Geonim and the Rishonim. You find all kinds of things like this, right? And many times, by the way, the law is like the Rishonim, even though they came after the Geonim. Many times we go like them. By the way, there's a difference between one and the other, though, right? Rishonim and Geonim. You know what the difference is? The difference is that we consider like the Geonim on a higher level in a sense. What does that mean? That their words are basically tradition. It's a tradition that they received from the yeshivot, from Bavel, from the yeshivot of the Talmud. Those Geonim, right? Most of the words they said are tradition that they received from their forefathers, from the former rabbis that they learned from, that they studied from, right? So therefore, their words are more tradition, right? Which is much superior. But the Rishonim, right, that they came after them, their words were not so much tradition because they already were like 500 years after the Talmud was already written. Their words were more like deduction, In other words, they went into the Talmud, they looked at the subject matter, right, and because of their great minds, they were able to deduce all kinds of things and come up with a conclusion according to the Talmud's, right, to the material of the Talmud.
Rashi was considered what?
Rashi was also Rishon, right, because he was after Rabbeinu Hananel. He was, right, yeah. Rabbeinu Hananel was before Rashi, right? So the point is that what happened was that the Rishonim and the Geonim had all kinds of disputes. So the whole world became like a big mishmash. What does that mean? That there's this opinion, that opinion. There's like 5-10 different opinions going on in every subject matter. So that became like a very difficult thing in this world, right? Became a difficult way to live like that. So what happened was that they decided to make some kind of a system to try to unite, all these different opinions into one, right, conclusion, basically, right? So there was many rabbis who made an attempt to do this, because they saw, right, that having all kinds of disputes from here to there, all kinds of issues, they saw that it wasn't really a good thing to have such a thing like that. It creates friction between the communities, right? It creates machlok. Right, disputes, fights, all kinds of all issues, right? It's not a good thing to have this kind of thing. So therefore, they came with a good intention, a lot of these rabbis, to try to fix this problem. So there was like several rabbis who tried to do this, right? One of them was Rav Sadia Gaon, right? And then it was Halachot Gdolot. These were the Geonim, these people, right? These good Geonim. They tried to write books where they tried to give like a final decision, right? These were the first ones who wrote these kind of books, right? Halachot Gdolot, and Rav Sadia Gaon, he wrote also a book of Halachot, and then came after that, right, the Rambam, and Rabbeinu Hananel, and then later on we had also the Rosh, right, and the Rif was before the Rambam. Right? So the point is, right, all these rabbis attempted, I'm sorry.
This is what you Renaissance, right?
No, we're talking about way before that. Way before that, in the medieval times, right? Okay. We're talking about like the year 1000, 1100, 1200, 1300, 1400, right? Yeah. So those times, what happened was that we had this attempt by several rabbis to unite all the opinions into one cohesive halakha. That's what happened, right? So, but it really didn't work out in many cases, right? Because what happened was that one rabbi who lived in this area was only accepted in his area, and the other area didn't accept him. So still, right, there was issues with this. They didn't really succeed. Even the Rambam, right, who made a really good attempt to make a cohesive, united halakha, didn't succeed. But in the Middle East, he was accepted, right? In the countries of the Middle East, Eretz Israel, Syria, right, Iraq, these places, he was very much accepted, the Rambam. Morocco, all the Middle Eastern areas where he was accepted, right? But there was other areas where he wasn't accepted, right? Like Eastern Europe, Western Europe, over there, it was more like the Rosh. The Rosh was accepted, right? And the Rif was accepted more in Africa, North Africa, Morocco, right? And what do you call it? Libya, right? All these places like that. I'm sorry, what are you saying? Tunisia. Yeah, these places like that. So the Rif was accepted in those places. So what happened was now came another, right, generation, which was the Tur, which was the son of the Rosh. He also attempted to make another, right, a book, right, to unite the various opinions, right? So he wrote the Tur, which brings the opinions of the Rambam, brings the opinion of the father, the Rosh, his father, right, and the Rif and the Rashba and all kinds of Rishonim. That's what he did. So this also he did a pretty good job, but in the end, though, it fell short of really uniting all the communities together into one cohesive community. But the truth is, he did a good job, though. So because of that, a couple of generations later, when came Maran Bet Yosef, and he decided to write the Bet Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch, so this attempt came out really, really better, because the Shulchan Aruch was accepted.
Who's Maran Bet Yosef?
Rabbi Yosef Karo. Right, from Spain, right? He was born in Spain and then he moved to Eretz Israel. So what happened was that Maran Bet Yosef, he also this was the most successful attempt to unite all the opinions together. So what he did was he took the book of the Torah as like a starting point, and he decided to take from there and try to unite even more, right? Even more than the Torah did, and to make a final decision for everybody, more or less, right? It succeeded very, very much. His work was accepted, right? Very, very much all over the whole world. But there was still one problem, right? That the Ashkenazim who came from Europe were still going according to the opinions of the Rosh and the Tosfot, and then came the Ramah, right? Who was also in the same generation as the Maran. And Ramah didn't know that Maran was writing this work. So he decided to do it himself. He also got the same idea, to try to do this, to unite all the opinions into one. So what he did was he tried to unite them. He made another attempt to do it. So what happened was that then he got word of this, the Ramah, right, that Maran was also doing this. So once he got word that he was doing it, and he started before him, so he quit on that. Right, right, exactly. He respected him. He quit. So then he did what he did, and when the end was, right, once Maran finished his work, the Shulchan Aruch and Bet Yosef, what he did was he wrote a gloss on that, right, in order to bring also the opinion of the Ashkenazim, the Tosfot and the Rosh, right, all these conclusions. He decided to bring it together. So basically, what we have today, right, is the Shulchan Aruch, which is considered to be still the main body of work accepted in halakha. Right, because of this reason. Because you have there the opinion of the Sfardim, you have the opinion of the Ashkenazim, so pretty much it unites, pretty much all the whole world. I'm sorry?
Why do we call Maran Bet Yosef?
Why do you call Maran? Okay, so this is like a famous thing where, right, the truth is, right, that there's two reasons for that. The classic reason, right, the real, the vintage reason, right, is because they say, right, that it's a really like a, this is like a, what do you call that? You use the Rashi Tevot, right? Abbreviation, right? It's an abbreviation for what? Mem, Resh, Nun, right? Mem in Gematria equals 200. I'm sorry, Resh in Gematria. Right? Resh in Gematria equals 200, right? So what does that mean? Me from Mem, Resh 200, Rabbanim Nismach, right? Maran Nismach. So what does that mean? That there was 200 rabbis who gave the smicha, who gave ordination to Maran Bet Yosef to be the leader in halakha. Right? These were the rabbis of Tzfat, right? In Eretz Israel. Yeah. Those 200 rabbis who were the top rabbis of that generation in Eretz Israel decided to make Maran the chief rabbi. He became chief rabbi of Israel, right? That's what happened.
Why Bet Yosef? Of the house of Joseph.
Yeah, because that's what he called his book, right? Because his name was Yosef. So he called it Bet Yosef, right? Nice catchy name, right? Yeah. Whatever. So the point is, right, that the Maran received ordination from 200 rabbis that he should be the one who decides halakha. And that's why it's called Maran. But the truth is, right, that in a more simple way, the word Maran in Hebrew means our master, our teacher. That's all. That's also another thing, right? So because of that, there's also other rabbis that call them Maran. Why is that? Because they say he's our master, he's our teacher. Maran. But it's like, you're right, exactly. We call him Maran, right? But really, the real Maran was Maran Bet Yosef. Right? That's something like more unique, right? Something more special, right over there. That's a different issue. Anyway, point is, Rabotai, that nowadays, right? Since the Achronim already came after the Rishonim. The period of the Rishonim, the earlier rabbis, we said, right, that was starting from Rabbeinu Hananel, right, and went on until about the Rosh and the Tur. And once the generation of the Tur was over, and there was also Trumat Hadeshen, there was also the Redvaz, that was the last generation of the Rishonim. So the period of the Rishonim went about how long? I'm sorry? Okay, so the period of the Rishonim went about 500 years, approximately. Yeah. Right. Also, the period of the Geonim was also about 400 years. The period of the Rishonim was about 500 years. So, but what happened was that, as we said, that the Rishonim felt strong enough to argue with the Geonim, even though they were way before them. But once the period of the Rishonim ended, those rabbis who now were in the period of the Achronim already, right, the different period, they already sensed, right, that they were not on that level to argue with the Rishonim. They were not on that level anymore. Definitely the level fell down. So therefore, what they decided to do was to let the opinions of the Rishonim stand as they are, right? And the Bet Yosef made decisions about that, right? What's going to be the halacha? But it says, right, the Bet Yosef in the introduction to the Bet Yosef, Maran Bet Yosef, he says over there something very, very important, right, and very, very crucial. Exactly what I'm telling you now, what I just told you now. He says over there, I personally don't have the power to go into the opinions of the Rishonim, the former rabbis, and decide who's right and wrong. He says, we don't have this power today. Yeah. We already cannot do that. We don't have the depths of understanding that they had. So he says, therefore, my job is not to tell you, and when I'm writing the Bet Yosef to decide the halacha, my job is not to tell you who's right and who's wrong. I cannot do that. I don't have the power to do that. He was being humble, by the way, in a sense also. It's humility. Humility. So what he said was, therefore, what we're going to do is make a system, right? Some kind of a system where we're going to decide the halacha according to the system. It has nothing to do with my understanding. It has more to do with the fact that there's a majority over here that are saying a certain way, and that becomes halacha. So we're going to take now the majority of the Rishonim and make them the halacha, right? Even though there was no bet din, there was no court between them. They never spoke with each other. They were different generations. They were living in different countries. All these things are true. But nevertheless, anyway, we're never going to say, right, that we know how to decipher between them. This we don't know, to decide who's right, who's wrong. But what we're going to do is make a majority. So what he decided to do was like this, right? The majority that he decided to do was not a simple majority, 20 against 30, 30 against 40, not like that. What he decided to do was, right, to make three main Rishonim, three main rabbis who are going to have more weight than all the other rabbis. Why give them more weight than the others? What they're heavier? What they ate more? What does that mean? What's the reason why? Why would you want to do that, right? So the answer is, that the reason he gave them more weight, several reasons, right? That we were told. One was because these rabbis were more accepted in the whole world than the other rabbis were. In other words, the custom in many places became like them. What does that mean? That, as we said, right, in the Middle East, the custom was in most places like the Rambam. In Africa, most places were doing like the Rif. In Europe, most places were doing like the Rosh. So therefore, he said, since the rulings of these three rabbis spread throughout the whole world more than any other place, more than any other rabbi, so therefore they carry more weight than the other rabbis do. And therefore he's using these three rabbis basically as like the pivotal element here to decide the halacha. So if we have 2 out of 3, halacha is going to be like them. That's what he says in Bet Yosef. Because they were more accepted, these rabbis. There's also another thing, right, which he says that, which I heard from Moena Rabbeinu, Rav Vadia al-Bashalom. He says, right, that there's also sources that bring down another reason why. That we use dafka, these 3 rabbis, right, more than the others. Is because these 3 rabbis, they're not only bringing the opinions of themselves. They also consider the opinions of the ones that came before them. In other words, they also did some kind of a sifting out. They sifted out the bad from the good, whatever, if there's such a thing like that, right, whatever. And they decided, right, this is halakha. So they also considered the opinion of many, many rabbis that came before them. And therefore, basically, what are we trying to say? That when you go according to these rabbis, you're actually going to many rabbis that were before them as well. Why? Because they already considered the opinions. So basically, when you're going like them, you're also going like most of the world as well. Yeah. That's what it is. And what do we mean most of the world? Most of the Jews and also most of the rabbis as well. So basically, when you go like them, you really have an absolute majority in the whole system. That's what it is. So therefore, this is the reason why Maran decided to go like 2 out of 3 with these rabbis, and he said, right, in a case where it's not clear what's halakha, meaning what there is no majority, so then we consider the other Rishonim as well, the other rabbis, right? We try to consider all of them to see, right, what's the majority, what's the superior opinion according to the majority. So then we go according to the general majority, more than these 3, right? We go outside that. We go outside the box, right? That's what they say, right? Whatever. So this is the reason. This is the reason why it was done this way. So what happened was that the Sephardim, adhered more to the rulings of the Shulchan Aruch more than the Ashkenazim. What happened was that the Ashkenazim, as time went on, different opinions came in also, right, outside the Shulchan Aruch. And in many Ashkenazi communities, they decided to do not like the Shulchan Aruch in these cases. Why? Because they had now different ideas that were presented by new rabbis who were in the new generations that they had, and therefore sometimes they decided to do not like the Shulchan Aruch. Right? What does that mean? They decided to do like, let's say, the Shach, right, or the Gra, all these big rabbis, right, that were in the times of the Achronim. And not like the Shulchan Aruch, not like the Ramah, who was the rabbi of the Ashkenazim, right? The one who. So this is what happened, basically, right? I'll give you just basically a rundown of how it developed. So basically, what we have today is that as we said, right, that if 500 years ago, already Maran and Shulchan Aruch decided not to argue with the Rishonim, all the more so we should not argue with the Rishonim, right? With the former rabbis. We have no business to argue with them. So what we do is basically just to see, right, who's the majority. According to the rules of halakha, there's also rules, right, how to decide the halakha. The majority, this rule, that rule, there's doubts, there's all kinds of issues. So because of all these things, we decide the halakha according to the rules of halakha. Even though we don't know how to really decide who's right and who's wrong. When it comes to Rishonim, we don't have to do that. We don't have this, how we do halakha. There's also a lot more details, but we can't go into everything now. Eventually we'll get into a lot of things, right? Okay, so, how much time do we have? Let's just try to say, right, that we should say, that we're going to discuss, B'ezrat Hashem, our first discussion is going to be on electricity. Okay. Right? So, I'm just going to give you like a little bit of introduction into this. So we don't have to take the time to get into it deep, but next time, B'ezrat Hashem, God willing. So what I'm telling you is that the electricity, right, when the epoch of electricity came into the world, which was about 150 years ago, approximately, whatever, electricity came in, it was discovered, and then it started to be used and everything. So what happened was that at that time, there was a big confusion amongst the rabbis, big dispute, big machloket. It was a big discussion. Meaning what? That they weren't really not really sure what electricity is. How do we define it, right? What is it considered to be, right? There was 2 schools of thought, basically. One school of thought was that electricity is fire, basically. Just a form of fire. So if that's the case, to use it on Shabbat, it's not allowed. Because, what does it say, right, in the Chumash, Avi? What does it say? Lo tevaru b'chol moshvotechem. Where is that? Where is that pasuk? Shemot lamed hey, right? Over there, pasuk 30, parak 35, and Shemot and Exodus, right? And pasuk Gimel, over there it says, right? Lo tevaru esh b'kol moshvotechem. So it's telling you, right? Don't kindle a fire. Don't burn a fire in all your dwelling places on Shabbat. So according to the school of thought that electricity is fire, so they were saying, oh my God, if you use this on Shabbat, you're like desecrating Shabbat. You're going over like one of the Av Melachot, one of the main labors of Shabbat is to make a fire. This was one school of thought. By the way, why did they think that electricity is fire? What's the reason why?
It's a current.
Okay.
It's heat. The heat comes.
The spark.
Yeah, he's right. David is right. He's dreaming it. I think he's getting dreams from So he's right though. Right? The what? the problem is that when you see electricity, right? Situations like this, you see sparks coming out. Did you ever see, by the way, just by chance, right? Did you ever see like, the elevator that's what we're using in our buildings?
Yeah.
If you see the open elevator, right? In other words, if you open up the casing, right? And you see the shaft of the elevator, and you see when the elevator the button is pressed and it starts to move, you see like a big wad of sparks coming out. Go like this, It's like, like July 4th you get over there, basically. A mini July 4th. That's what you get. Yeah. So you see from there, right, that electricity is really fire.
But I'm surprised that hasn't been amended, because we don't really put any effort of work into creating that spark.
Good. We're going to get into this. We're going to go deep into the subject, what you're talking about. Yes.
Based on your understanding, your assessment,
yeah.
in the next 10 to 15 years, there may be new laws about electricity?
I think that the laws of electricity are changing all the time. They're evolving as we go along. And we'll explain to you why. We're going to explain to you why that is, by the way. This is a deep discussion. We're going to discuss this very thoroughly.
Will be allowed on Shabbat? Possible?
I think that there is a chance. Yes, there is a chance. There is a chance. But we have to discuss this in depth, Let's go step by step, right? Little by little. So as we said, right, that when you see electricity, especially when it's high voltage, you're going to see like big sparks coming out. And also, by the way, call it whatever you want. All right, we're going to discuss this. But there's also another thing, right, which is that that electricity can also start a fire very easily, right? Sometimes it starts a fire. By the way, most fires today are started by electrical, electric shorts. That's what they're started by. Yeah. Yeah. So, what I'm telling you, Rabbi, is that the electricity is very much associated with fire. Because it makes fires, it creates fires, it gives off sparks, it looks like fire in many ways.
Yeah, similar properties.
Exactly, it's very similar to fire. That's the whole thing, right? There was also another a school of thought opposed to this. What they were trying to say is like this, right? That really electricity is not fire at all. As you said, it's a current. By the way, the modern school of thought, right, regarding this, what really does it say? By the scientists I'm talking about, right? What is electricity? They don't call it fire.
No, it's a byproduct.
Okay.
Byproduct of friction.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
It's not.
Right. So basically, what they want to say is like this, right? Electricity is a current. It's a flow of electrons going through a medium, right? Some kind of medium, whatever it is. A wire. It could be your body. Also, could be anything. Any kind of medium.
Energy. It's moving with
energy. Yes, it's energy. Yes, it's a current. It's a flow of electrons. So what they want to say is like this, right? This school of thought wants to say that really electricity is not a fire. Why? Because really, when electricity is flowing through a wire, in general, doesn't give off sparks. Sometimes it does.
Contained.
Right? It's contained. Yeah.
It used to contain it.
Exactly.
If it gets unstable, it's not giving spark. That's
so right, the sparks are really like a byproduct of electricity, right? But really, it's just a current of energy. That's what it is, according to this school of thought, right? Two schools of thought, basically. And by the way, these two schools of thought were fighting with each other for quite a while, for several years, going back and forth. And by the way, they were bringing in all kinds of experts
to carriages with the babies up and down the 6th floor.
So what happened was that no problem.
The law comes that electricity is allowed on Shabbat, for example.
Yeah.
All the previous times.
Yeah.
It's not covered because the law was different back then.
You're asking me if it goes retroactively, right? That's what you're asking. Okay, that's an interesting question, right? The truth is that there is no retroactivity when it comes to these things, right? In other words, what we're going to say is that, either we had a mistake or we didn't have a mistake, right? Either we had, if we had a mistake, then everything that was done was actually, we had a wrong understanding.
Yeah.
Right? That's what it was. But anyway, let's not jump the gun, because we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. But the point is, that electricity, right? There's two schools of thought. They were fighting with each other, and they brought in scientists also, electricians also. They brought in, right? Okay, this electrician would say this, the other electrician would say something else, and there were all kinds of rabbis getting involved. This rabbi, that rabbi, big rabbis. So actually, the truth is, what happened was like this, right? That these two schools of thought were evolving and developing separately, and therefore there were some rabbis who wrote actually in their books, electricity is no problem at all. Yeah, there were some rabbis like that. Yes. On the other hand, there was some rabbis who wrote, right, that you're liable to death, right, when you use electricity on Shabbat, right? Liable because you're lighting a fire.
Yeah.
A person who lights a fire on Shabbat is liable to death. So if that's the case, you understand? We have two extremes over here. These two extremes. So what happened was that these two schools of thought were like both going forward, and then at one point in time, what happened was that the custom became to be stringent about this. You understand? What does that mean? Not to use electricity on Shabbat. Right, exactly. In other words, the custom, this school of thought beat out the other one in terms of custom. You understand? But that's regarding custom. But we're not only discussing custom. We have to discuss really the truth of the matter.
Yes.
To understand the real.
Tell us which one you side with, and we'll go with that.
You think I'm going to let you off so easy? Okay, so let's move forward.
You don't use the elevator.
Let's move forward. We'll discuss everything. Elevators, we'll discuss everything. So we have to go step by step, right? So anyway, the point is, Rabbi, I'll tell you something interesting, right? That the first book of Yebi Omer, right, which was one of the great books that our rabbi wrote, Morin Rabbeinu, Ravadia. This was his greatest work. Total genius, you know. There's 10 volumes that he wrote in this book. So this book is considered to be like the greatest genius of the generation, no question about it. So over there, in the first volume, he has actually a response about this issue. First volume. At that time, he was about, 25, 30 years old when he wrote this, right? Yeah. The rabbi, yeah, he was a big genius. So what happened was that he wrote, what was it, the topic matter? They asked him about using a microphone on Shabbat, right, in the shul, right? For the Chazan, Marciano, you remember Marciano?
Yes.
Yeah, so the question was like, are you allowed to be Marciano or not? That was the question, right? Basically, right? That was the question. You know it was Marciano. Over there in the Sephardic Jewish Center. He used the microphone, this guy. So, yeah, he used the microphone. He's been using it for 50 years already. He's not accepted, He was ostracized because of that. Okay, whatever. Anyway, the point is that the question was like this, right? Are you allowed to use a microphone on Shabbat or not? So the rabbi discussed this, deliberated. He brought all the opinions, this opinion, that opinion, right? He went back and forth, So his original conclusion was that definitely it's not allowed to use a microphone on Shabbat, right? And he was pretty severely, against it there, Something interesting occurred there, although what's the interesting thing? Right before he finished to write this response, came to him one of his friends, right? Who was this? He was also a big rabbi. His name was Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, right? Ashkenazi rabbi. Also a big rabbi. Yeah, big gadol. So what happened was that they were good friends with these two. They studied together also, by the way. And what happened was that he comes to him, to Rav Ovadia, Rav Shlomo Zalman, and tells him, he says, you know what? I've been researching this topic for quite a while now, and he wrote a book on it also. Which is considered to be very authoritative, by the way, this book. So he explained to him how electricity works, because it seems like that really the rabbi didn't know before this, how it really works. He still didn't know what was applying either. In other words, it wasn't clear. You understand? The knowledge of this was not so clear, how it really works. So he came to Rav Ovadia. I told him, he said, listen, I have to tell you the truth, okay? The electricity is not fire. Don't try to think that it's fire. It's not true. And explain to me why not, right? So explain to him that electricity is not really a fire. It's just a flow of energy, as we said, right? Electrons flowing through a wire has nothing to do with fire. Because the definition of fire is that there's a flame. You understand? If there's no flame, you cannot call it a fire. You understand? So he explained to him that because of that, we cannot really say that a person who uses electricity on Shabbat is considered to be liable to death. Liable to stoning, right? So the rabbi knew that this rabbi was very knowledgeable and very smart. And he accepted his words. In other words, he could feel that he was saying the truth. You understand? So what happened was, in the end, after he finished the whole response, he wrote another paragraph to add that in, what the rabbi told him. Understand? So he says, now I really know what electricity is, now that he explained to me. You understand? So basically he said, you know what, but in the end, I'm not going to reverse my decision. I still don't allow to use the microphone. Anyway, but one thing we have to say is for sure, is not considered to be like, a person who uses it like liable to death. Because it's not from the Torah, not Deoraita. It's not considered to be like you're lighting a fire.
It's rabbinical.
Exactly. That's what they wanted to say, right? They wanted to say that this was a rabbinical problem, not from the Torah. This was the conclusion of the rabbi. And by the way, in the end, you should know that this school of thought won out. What does that mean? I just told you just the opposite, right? I told you the school of thought that tells you not to use electricity won out. Now I'm telling you the opposite? What am I, crazy? I lost my mind? No. I'm telling you, they're both true. What does that mean? That on the one hand, the school of thought that doesn't allow to use electricity won out. We don't use electricity on Shabbat. On the other hand, the school of thought that says that it's not a fire also won out. What does that mean? That we consider it to be a rabbinical prohibition, not from the Torah.
They got their own.
Exactly. So we came somewhere in the middle. Understand? We made a compromise.
We won't use
right? Exactly. But to be honest with you, Rabbi, there's no time now to get into this. Next week we'll get much more deeper into this topic. So I'll just give you a little bit overview to give you to what your tongue a little bit, What's Hashem?